Cheers.
Cheers. This will be good.
Mm-hmm. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's live event. If you can hear us well, go ahead and write us a comment about where you're from and give us your name. We can give you guys a shout. My name is Allie DeAndrea. I am the digital marketing manager here at First Lite, and with me is a very special guest. She is a good friend here with us tonight. Go ahead and
I'm Jessie Johnson, and I am an Artemis coordinator. So Artemis is a women's hunting and angling conservation group. And then I also work on public land state-specific stuff with Wyoming Wildlife Federation. Yeah.
All right, I see our first comment, Blake. Hey, Blake from Georgia. Welcome. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Oh, another one. Matt from Texas.
Nice. You loud and clear. Sean from Oregon. Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. So tonight we have got lots of stuff to talk about. As Jessie said, she works within the conservation world. She's super well-knowledged and well-rounded in her field. And we have a super cool giveaway going on tonight. So I don't know if you guys can see off to Jessie's right, might be your left, sits a very cool Cypher camo hunting pack. It's by Exo Mountain Hunting Gear, and they are limitedly releasing this guy. It's actually not available for purchase anymore, and we snagged one up just specifically for tonight for this giveaway. So that will go to the person who asks the best question. So definitely get some questions rolling, and we'll be here to answer them for you. So Jessie, why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about exactly what you do for each of the folks.
So with Artemis, Artemis is a new women's hunting and angling conservation group. It is a program of the National Wildlife Federation, and it's an attempt to make women feel like we're not just the plus one in the conservation conversation. I think often, and not on purpose, but just because it's sort of how it's always been, conservation groups tend to market first to men, and it tends to leave out a different voice that you hear from the women hunter and angler. And so, we're public lands, talking about how important it is to keep them public and to keep them in the federal ownership, and then also talking about other things, whether it's mule deer conservation work or cutthroat, and then a big emphasis on recruitment, and not just recruitment of women to hunting and angling, but recruitment of the women that are already hunters and anglers into joining the conservation conversation. So I think it's really important because we have a very different voice. We have a different way of telling stories, and we have a different way of talking about things. And it's a new sort of conservation army I think we can build with the women. I mean, we're all tough, get out there and hunt them women, so I think it's lucky to have that. And then I do work with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation as well, and I do a lot of public lands advocacy work around that. So, sometimes that means being down at the Wyoming State Legislature and sort of keeping in line as far as the public land stuff. And sometimes it means I get to throw public land pint nights and talk about the cool stuff that's going on for public land work in Wyoming as well. So it's been a very lucky, I can go from a national sort of look and then actually focus down to my home state, which is where I live in Wyoming.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about how people can get involved in either of those organizations?
So Artemis, I'm sure you guys have seen, and I hope if you haven't, we are new. I mean, we're about 2-3 months old. It's been a lot of work sort of getting everything together. You can go online to find more about Artemis, which is artemis.nwf.org. And you can become a supporter and kind of find out what's happening. We have a couple events that we're going to be doing. We are teaming up with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation on July 29th to do a fence pull. So we're pulling, I think, 2 3/4 mile fence out of some of these areas that wildlife can get hung up in, and it's just kind of not great to have there. And then we're also doing an intro to archery course in Helena, Montana, and we're tentatively talking about it. I don't have a total date for that, but it's going to be sometime in the mid-August. So you can come and watch our website to see what events we're doing and then also what's new and coming up for us. We're really excited to be here on the scene, and to have the support of the hunting and angling community is great.
Yeah, very cool. So guys, don't forget to ask questions because we will be giving away that Cypher pack right over there. So keep them rolling in. So what is one thing that, whenever talking about public lands to folks who may not understand what they are, at least for me personally, I feel like one of the biggest hurdles is really just the understanding of what they are. I know, even just talking with folks who have been using public lands but don't even know it, what is the barrier? Yeah, how do you talk about that in a way that is easy for people to understand?
Boy, so it's, and clearly in the West it's a much broader thing. Public lands are all federally owned lands, so it can be anything from national forests to BLM lands. In Wyoming, you're driving through a lot of it and you see this wide expanse of the rolling sagebrush. A lot of that is BLM. It can be national parks. It can be all of these different designations of land. So it's not just one category that you can say this is, only this is public land. So there are 640 million acres of public land in the United States. And that's spread out throughout different states. Obviously, when you get onto the west side, mostly because of the Louisiana Purchase, you have a lot more public land that's out there. I think Idaho is 60% public land, if I'm correct, and Wyoming is about 48% public land, so almost half, and over half of these states are this big, wide expanse of public land that you can reach and beyond, get onto. They're sort of the birthright of all Americans. That's sort of the unique thing, is they're held in trust for everyone, and not just us, but for future generations as well, which I think is really the important part, is that these are not just ours now to use and love, but they are also what I would say our obligation to use, protect, and make better if we can.
Right, absolutely. I saw a question roll by that, I apologize, it's already off the screen, but it was something along the lines of, how do I get my 9-year-old daughter, out there hunting, out there angling?
I think, and it's not just from a 9-year-old daughter stance, I think it's if you are a woman and you're looking into getting into hunting and angling, I think there's a little bit more daunting of a hill to climb. And some of that is due to not having the role models out there doing it and talking about it enough, or not having them do it in a way that's relatable. And then some of it is also, it's a new and upcoming thing. Women are, I think, 20% or 25% of all new hunters, which is incredible. And that's been an 89% jump in the last, I think, 10 years or so. So just exposing them to what's out there. My dad would take me out on what he used to call nature walks. And, nice. We would go, and everything from just taking him out, getting him out there, talking about what it is, I think even shed hunting is what my dad used to take me doing. I remember I found my first shed. It was a spike elk antler, and I think I still have it because it's create the memories.
My first shed was actually a spike elk too.
It doesn't matter what size they are. The first one is really important. But I think it's really important to get them out there and to just have a good time, and it doesn't have to have any kind of parameters on it. Don't make it like we have to go do this. Just go, we have to go have fun. And I think that's with anyone that you're wanting to get involved with that. And I think to piggyback on that, I did just see another question that was how to get somebody involved in conservation groups. What's the easiest way to do that?
Question. Yeah.
And it really is place specific. We're lucky that with the National Wildlife Federation, who Artemis is sort of a program of, you have 51 affiliates, and a lot of them are in, obviously all the states. And so a good way to start is go to the National Wildlife Federation website, find out what state affiliate you have, and you can contact them. Or, there's other groups. There's Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is another great one. But you just kind of have to find out what's in your area. And the only way to do that is sort of through a search, honestly.
Yeah. No, totally. I saw a question that just flew by. Who should we contact to voice our opinions on public lands? That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is something, if you are someone who is just getting involved and or intrigued by the idea, these are lands that I hunt on, that I fish on, that I hike on, who can I tell that I love these lands and these are important? And I would say it's absolutely, our government officials, the legislators, the folks who are actually in office making those decisions, passing bills and really changing what can be done with those lands.
Yeah, and I think it's not just federal government officials. I think contacting your
Local
congressmen
too.
and your state senators is great, but also your state legislature. It kind of depends where the conversation is as far as your state and their stance on public lands. I know in Wyoming, we've had to remind our legislature time and time again that the hunters and anglers of Wyoming are not savvy with this selling of public lands. And I think a big thing is when you are contacting them, and if you are part of a group and you get these letters and sign on to this or send this letter, and all you do is type in your name, a big thing is take that letter and copy and paste it so you get the talking points. But make sure it's your own personal story and your own personal voice. That's a really big thing. Not to just send a canned letter. Take the initiative and write about something that you've experienced and loved on your public lands. It's important to make that personal connection. You are talking to a human. You're talking, our senators, our legislatures, they're humans, and they appeal to human connection. So making sure that it's personal is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I saw another question that was, as a female hunter, what do you think can be improved upon within the industry? So I'm assuming you're talking about like the hunting industry. And I would like to answer that from the point of just someone who enjoys being outside and hunting for meat that I can put in my freezer and feed myself and my friends and family with. I feel like I'm really proud to work for First Lite because, all the folks here love to hunt for their meat and love to be outside, and it's really this like full circle connection. And I think sometimes the industry doesn't display it in that light. So I would say that's the biggest thing for me.
And I think some of that is looking as a female hunter, and I'm a relatively new hunter. I haven't been hunting my whole life, and getting into it was very sort of daunting. There wasn't First Lite didn't have their great women's gear out quite yet.
Which
they were
we
just
do
getting
now.
there, so
Thank
it
God.
is amazing.
And it's awesome.
It's and now knowing that it's incredible. But it was gear that was either a lower quality, not First Lites, but sort of across the board in the industry.
What was
gear that wasn't great, or it was pink with rhinestones. And
I used to wear, this was before First Lite came out with their women's line, which now we have a full women's line that essentially mirrors other pieces that we've created for guys that worked out great. We took that technology and just changed it so that it would fit a female figure. The technology is exactly the same. The function is exactly the same. But what I used to do, I would wear like boy size, not men's size. I would wear like boy sizes because they like kind of fit better. But now we've got gear, so our ladies
I
can
will
be
say I
kitted
was
out.
a First Lite fan. Like even when you weren't making the women's clothes, I definitely had some of the men's pieces in size small.
I think we all.
I just saw a really good one that was talking about how you can get youth excited about the preservation of public lands.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's getting them out there. I mean, you can't. A personal experience is more powerful than anything you can tell someone. It's why I would love to take a lot of these people that don't quite understand it, that are making decisions, say in DC or even in some of our state legislature, that they don't get out enough to really know it. And there's just incredible experiences out there. I got into conservation because I went out hunting and I shot a mule deer the first time, and I'm an archery hunter, so it'd been a lot of work, 2 years, I think, worth of practicing and figuring out how to do things, and that moment just changed my life. I had that epiphany that, this is the mule deer habitat, and yes, it's dwindling, but it's not just theirs, it's ours. And it's talking about the fact that we need to talk about this in an ecological, it is in our best interest to preserve these two, not just wildlife, not just for clean air, clean water, but for our human experience and what it means to be part of a landscape and part of this world, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I saw another question that probably will have a similar answer, but it was, how to get the youth involved in conservation.
Boy, yeah, and that's
a $1 million question.
It's a $1 million question. And I don't know that we have a solid answer for that one, and I think it's something that's it may be something that we need to tackle, and that I would say that more often than not, if you take them out early, it's easier to connect the dots as far as what you could lose. You build stakeholders when you use a landscape, so when you start taking kids out young and they fall in love with, places in their backyard, public lands in their backyard, and then something comes up, and maybe they're in high school or maybe they're in college, and they realize there's some legislation in there to maybe do some harm with it, or something that's not great, or to transfer it, hopefully not. But then they can engage on, like, hey, I went out there with my dad shed hunting, or I went out there and I, they don't have to hunt to enjoy this. You can take them hiking, you can take them camping. I mean, even just car camping is great. It's take your kids out, just get them outside, because I think we're so in this plugged in stage that we forget to look up from our cell phones and realize what's dwindling.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a question go by earlier. I believe it was from a gal who asked, why isn't more of the women's gear in store so that I can try it on? And that's something that we definitely hope will improve, so that you guys can try it on and buy it at your local retailer. But one of the things that I would recommend is giving us a call. We really do have an awesome group of folks working here who are actually in the field hunting and using this gear, and are very knowledgeable on the size and fit of it. So if you ever have any questions related to that, give us a call for sure.
I just saw a really great question that's talking about when you're hunting or you're out there and you're on federal leased grazing land.
Okay.
What rights does the leasee have? Can they kick you off? And the answer is no. That's your public land. They are paying for the use of it and paying for the use of grazing their cattle or sheep or whatever it is, but no, they do not have the right to kick you off. And I think a big thing is know your public and private lands. There's a lot of maps and things out there where it has the different colors for the different designations. So make sure you're on par with that and that you are actually on public land. But you're not going to see, short of the little white squares, which are the private ones, don't go there. That's your public lands, and that's part of your heritage. I mean, that's your right.
I see a question here that I really like that I want you to answer. What's the biggest challenge we face right now from our House and Senate threatening public lands? Like, what should be at the top of people's radar? And I know you probably have a laundry list of things, but if there was one thing that these folks could walk away and, have a little more knowledge in their pocket, what would it be?
So I think, that's a tough one. Luckily, and I think it's because a lot of the conservation groups and you all have done a really great job of sharing your good personal experiences. A lot of the bills that were right out there and talking about transfer in the sort of wide open space aren't there right now. There are things that are taking digs, whether it's at wildlife funding and the conservation of that, or there's some other ones out there. What I should say is right now, thankfully, we don't have a huge thing, but there's a lot of wording in state legislature. I know Wyoming's got some that are cause for concern. And so rather than I think they're hoping that from the state initiative, this is going to go federal. So what you want to do is stop it at the state level, because say in Idaho, if the state legislature is talking about this and then they pass, whether it's a resolution or something like that, which as I know, I'm not sure, but I don't think they have one going, then the federal government goes, oh, see, the states support this. And so stopping it at your state legislative level is really important. And unfortunately, I mean, I know Wyoming's, and we've got a few things of concern, but the sort of grand scale is more plugging into what's happening there. And unfortunately, it's not an easy answer, like, here's what you do now. What I would say is what you do now is become part of one of these groups that are fighting for public lands. So you know what's happening, and they'll know better what's happening in your backyard.
I saw a question roll by, and I'm not going to get the wording the same, but it was essentially, how do you talk to non-hunters about this kind of stuff? And he worded it in a way that was funnier, so if you caught that, go back and read it. But I think for me, it's about talking about the experience of it all and the value of the animal that you're killing, processing, and then consuming,
I think you're really right on about that.
Yeah.
We focus too much on the end. It's not even the end. I don't even like calling it the climax of the story, but that kill shot.
Sure. Which I think, like, hunter to hunter, we can understand that. But I think non-hunter to hunter, that is a different world, you know?
It doesn't resonate, and it doesn't sit well.
No.
So I think it's important that when you're talking to non-hunters, and especially non-hunters that are maybe pretty vehemently non-hunting, the way that I think about it is that we live in a world where, and especially the very vehement non-hunters, thank goodness they care about animals.
Yeah.
Thank goodness they care about what's happening, because it could be a lot worse. They could not care at all. Mm-hmm. And I think talking about coming from a similar position of we all care, and then tell a story of an experience and talk about the work put in and what it's like to be when you see the sunrise and elk bugles are wafting over the wind. And I think paint the story of what it is to be out there, and talk about the times that you haven't killed something and the fact that that's still successful in many hunters' minds.
Yeah.
Making it relatable and making it kind, and always be respectful. I think we lose our temper too often. Mm-hmm. With the non-hunting community, and it comes from a place of either lack of understanding or deep care that is maybe a little misplaced. It's hard to talk about, and be prepared to be called all sorts of things, and just say,
not nice things.
Just, I think, say, like, thank you for caring, thank you for putting it out there, and that gives you the sort of, what I would say, I hate to say that, but moral high ground in that sense, and just make sure that you always keep it classy, always.
I know someone wrote
kindly.
that. Someone said keep it classy.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's a good point.
Yeah, and I think you bring up such a good point that overall, like, whoever is, the person who's asking these questions, you probably care about the exact same thing. It's just that we're looking through different lenses. So I do think, saying, hey, like, we actually care about the same thing, and, thank you for sort of, caring about wildlife just as much as I do. Yeah, for sure.
There's a great one that talks about if we think the new movement for eating organic would help bring more young people into hunting, and I think it does. Absolutely.
I think it does too.
And it certainly makes me feel good about what I'm eating. I can tell you I haven't bought a steak in a long time because I've got elk steak in my freezer.
You got plenty of steak.
But I think it brings in a whole new sort of vibe of hunting where people are going out because they know that this is an animal that had a wild, free, well-fed, hopefully. And a better life than what you would get in a lot of livestock yards. I do think that will bring more hunters in, and I think it will continue to. What we have to make sure happens with that is that when new hunters come in and we're using these resources, and this is something Artemis focuses really on, is that there is no privilege without obligation. If you are using your public lands, you are obligated to protect them for future generations, in my mind. And if you are using our wildlife and resources, you are obligated to stand up for them and be the voice when they cannot. I think that's important to all new hunters and to old hunters.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not a question that anybody has asked, but I'm going to be selfish for a second. I have a question for you. When did you really become involved in conservation? Like, did you have a light bulb moment where you were like, I really care about this and I want to get involved? Or, like, how did that happen for you?
I kind of have I have a light bulb moment, but I was blessed with a family that I grew up in conservation. I have two parents. I'm the only child of two ranch managers who are these people that have just talked about how we are part of the earth and it's our place to take care of it, and I've grown up with that. That's just always been sort of what I've heard time and time again, at the dinner table, talking about being thankful that we're, eating the garden carrots or whatever, whatever it was, and talking about that animals are a part, and who are we to be higher than them as humans. So look at them as partners, look at them as your equal, and it doesn't matter if it's a ground squirrel or if it's a deer or if it's a grizzly bear, they are your equal. And it was very just sort of indoctrinated into me by that. But I will say that my first hunt and my first mule deer was truly like the spark that really lit the fire. I had the kindling and all the everything there, but that hunt really solidified into me this moment of, I just took the life of something, and I'm going to spend my life making sure that these animals are protected and be the voice for them when I cannot, or when they cannot be. So.
I think you might have just answered another question that went by. It was, what's your most memorable hunt? Is that it for you?
Yeah, it really was. I had this incredible sort of lead up to it where I would learning to shoot archery, which was no walk in the park. And I went out and I took a 27-yard archery shot on a mule deer, and he disappeared, I remember, over the skyline, and I remember sitting there and having this, I had the shakes so bad. I was like trembling and crying and sort of laughing, and I don't even know what the emotion was.
Yeah, too many.
And I sat there and I remember counseling myself, okay, give him the 30 minutes because he went out of sight, and I felt like I had a really good shot, and honestly it was the most memorable because we didn't find him that night. And
how did that feel?
It was horrible. I spent the whole night just like, I don't even think I slept. I was just laying there feeling like,
I feel like a lot of people can relate to that.
And it turned out that, he had just gone over, and it had started snowing when it got dark, and we just didn't find him. And he hadn't gone more than 50 yards. We had walked right by him, like the 3 or 4 yards from this deer, but his eye shine was tucked away. There was just no way to find out where he was, so we didn't find him till the morning. Thankfully, it'd been cold, nothing had spoiled, but that was really that light bulb of like, oh Lord, like what have I done? And I thought it was a good shot, and then it, didn't find him. So it was very, that was memorable, and hopefully I never repeat that. But.
No, totally. I think for me, my most memorable hunt was actually not one where I was the one with the weapon in my hand. Mm-hmm. I was out with my boyfriend Nick, and we were hunting whitetails in Pennsylvania, and he had shot and killed a white-tailed doe. And I watched the whole thing, and it was the very first time that I had seen that whole process take place. Mm-hmm. And I helped out with like field dressing the deer and breaking her down, and later butchering her and then putting her right into the freezer. And it was like this whole spectrum of, exactly what hunting is. And I feel like that was my most memorable.
There was a really good one. I think I want to hear your answer as well. So I think this is something we should both say is prior to your first hunt, or your first archery hunt, what was one thing that we wished we had prepared for more?
Good question.
I think that was a really great one.
Wow. We were actually joking about this the other day. So I am originally from Western Pennsylvania, and I moved out to Idaho. And when I first got here, learning how to hunt out west was, a big learning curve. It takes a lot to kind of figure it out. And I would go to spots that now it like kind of makes me chuckle, that I'll like drive by spots and I'm just like blown away that I thought that hunting right there was a good idea. Or, I climbed a 2,500 vertical mountain, just straight up thinking that was like, I don't know. It just like, it makes me chuckle a little bit to think about what I started doing. So I think if you have a hunting mentor to go out with, that's a great thing to do. I personally, I kind of love the pain of learning it yourself, if that makes sense. So
you learn it a little better, I think.
Yeah, but it's a lot harder. You probably learn it a little better, but at the same time, if you have a hunting mentor, I do think that's a great way. Like, that's solid. Yeah. Other than that, God, one thing I wish I knew, is this archery specific?
No, I think it's just, I would say broad.
Broad?
Yeah.
I would say be patient and take the time to look around at the beautiful country that you're in, from east to west, from north to south, and really like feel that and enjoy that. And I think finding enjoyment in that part of it is one thing that'll help you stick around.
Absolutely. I think that's really, I couldn't have said that better. I think that as far as what I'm doing and with the work with Artemis, that's something that I'm really,
that's a good answer. Mm-hmm.
I'm really pushing is that experience of enjoying being out there, and it's not just about the kill, and it's the hunt, it's the story. You know, we as hunters like to tell our campfire stories, and it's not just about the time you shot it. It's about, well, for instance, on my first elk hunt, it was like maybe 4 days in, and we'd been getting up early and going out and just kicking butt up the hill, and I was exhausted and tired, and I had a pack that squeaked, and I had a full meltdown where I pulled the pack off and like threw it onto the ground and was just like done. And I think like recognizing that that was something like for me to prepare for, is recognizing that it's not always this like epic video of a hunt. It's a lot of hard work, and it's often hard work that you don't get an animal with. And so doing what you said was really important, and Artemis in that sense, taking that experience and turning that, I think Steve Rinelli uses the term high grade fun. It's the fun where you're sort of miserable, but then you talk about it really fondly and want to go back. Taking that and turning that into a passion to save the places you're in. Yeah. So that drive to get up the hill, that drive to go get your elk, needs to be the drive to also save your public lands and your work like that. So Artemis is focusing on changing the culture of hunting, because hunting has needed a little bit of a new definition, I think, recently. We've relied too much on this sort of kill shot, you know, big animals or the important ones kind of thing, and we have to come back to what makes us hunters, whether it's sustainability, whether it's the experience of being tied to the landscape. And I think that's a niche for Artemis, because women are a voice that people aren't used to hearing in the hunting industry, so maybe it's something that they'll listen to a little more. Maybe this is how we start turning the tide and talking about the reality of hunting rather than the marketing of hunting.
Ooh. I like that. I like that.
I did just see from Chelsea, she asked
Chelsea,
how I came up with the name for Artemis. And
that's a good one.
It was hilarious, actually. There's a lot of women's coalitions out there, and being part of the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, I have a lot of W's in my life that are in acronym form. And I was sitting down and tossing around, I mean, like, this is pretty funny, Women of the Outdoors, which then I realized was the acronym was WOO, and was not something that was very reflective of what I wanted Artemis to be. Yeah. And then I thought about, what do we want Artemis to be? And I thought about the protection of wildlife, the protection of lands, and I started Googling this, and the name Artemis pops up because she is the Greek goddess of wildlife, and she is also of childbirth, so you have this very light and dark, that there is no life without death, and I think that's something that hunters really need to focus on. Yeah. We often like to not talk about the darker side of what hunting is, the death of an animal, and I think the enjoyment out of that. I mean, we really, it's melancholic enjoyment, because you've worked really hard for this and you've put a ton of work into it, but it's also this, you should never be taking a life that you feel totally okay with. It should always hurt just a little bit, you know, right there. And Artemis reflected that, you know, her stories and her Greek mythology is very built around this light and dark, this protection, but this also very reality look at the world. And I think that's really been the place where we need women, and the place where we need a new voice. So
yeah, absolutely. I do just want to pause for a second. For any of you guys that are just tuning in, we are giving away a Exo Mountain Gear pack in Cypher, which you can kind of see off to the side of Jesse there. And that is going away to the person who asks the best question. So just in case you're just tuning in, so everybody's on the same page. I saw a question that went by a little bit earlier that asked, what's your opinion on like draw tags versus over-the-counter tags?
Ooh, like, I guess,
just ask what's your opinion.
Do I want more? I put in my home state, I put in for tags that were very hard to draw. with the expectation that I would not be joining or like drawing them. Someday I will get lucky.
Yeah.
But I do that because very often, you know, if you're a hunter that gets off roads and kind of gets back in there, general hunting can be as good as a high draw. Wyoming's blessed in that sense, and I won't tell you any more about that. But I was happy to hunt general. I feel like I drew the tag of a lifetime because I get to hunt and in places that I know well. And so I have this sort of like war of like, someday I'll really draw this incredible tag, but I've never been disappointed when I don't.
Yeah. See, I have a similar feeling in that I am having so much fun learning the areas that I'm hunting and learning the wild game that's there and figuring out the terrain. And there's something about that is just, you know, hits me deep, I guess. And it's like with a general tag, you know that you'll be able to do that continually. So you really get the benefit of learning the landscape and learning the animals that live there. But the sort of excitement in drawing a tag that is kind of exclusive and limited, there is sort of excitement in that itself. And I feel like that can, especially if you're someone who has been hunting for a long time and you've been doing the same thing over and over again and you are ready for something to, you know, just like get more exciting. I think draw tags are the perfect way to kind of spice something up, but it might take you a long time to.
It's also a good way to learn new country, because when you go out and you put in for a super limited draw tag and all of a sudden you get it, it's like, oh gosh, now the work starts. And so you know, I find that you start poring over maps, you look at Google Earth, it's like, okay, where are the best draws here? And I feel like you get to know more of a state and you get to see more of your public lands, unless, you know, it's a private land, but still you're out there and you get to know more of the country that you live in, whether it's in, you know, Wyoming or Pennsylvania. You know, I think it's just important to figure, you know, sort of get into the country there. I did see a really interesting one that talks about what's the best way to get like a young daughter into hunting, or to sort of lead them into hunting. And my biggest thing is to say that you can't nudge someone into something. I think it's important to talk about what you love about it, make it an experience that's really coveted.
Yep.
But hunting's not for everyone, and it shouldn't be, because our tags will get a lot harder to draw if that's the case.
Yeah.
But it's important that we talk about this in a sense of like, hunting isn't for everyone, and if it's not for your daughter, then still take her outside, take her camping, and enjoy the meat that you hunted with her. You know, when you bring it home, it's not something that anybody should ever be pushed into, but I think you have a way that you can sort of correctly paint it as a picture they want to see.
Yeah, totally. There's a question that just popped up, like who or what has been the biggest hunting influence on your life? And I feel like I'm about to sound like a little bit cheesy, but honestly, working for a company like First Lite has really shaped the way that I look at things like this. And I feel very thankful that I'm surrounded by folks who have such a clear view on this, and they've definitely been hands down the biggest influence in, you know, what my views are within hunting today.
I had an incredible mentor when I was learning how to hunt.
Who's that?
Jared Oakleaf. He was wonderful, and he was somebody that led me into it. I mean, he taught me how to shoot a bow, and he had me with a blindfold in front of the target for a couple weeks. I kept calling him the Mr. Miyagi of hunting because I was getting so frustrated. So I just wanted to learn how to shoot.
Yeah.
But that kind of meticulousness in preparing, and that kind of care spent, and that emphasis on the fact that you must be as flawless as you can be in what you know and how your technique is to be a good hunter.
Yep.
And then just the way that he knew the landscape that we were hunting in, and would talk about how when he was a kid his dad would take him here, or things like that. That changed my view. It really sort of narrowed me in on these incredible experiences, and it talked about how, you know, with that much work into it, you better do it right.
For sure. Absolutely. I see another comment here. why does the conservation movement by hunters seem to be concentrated in the West? And how does Artemis plan on tackling East Coast conservation? So I would like to take the first part of this,
please.
Especially because I came from Western Pennsylvania. So for me, I think that conservation is focused in the areas where there are large amounts of public land, which is the West. It's just a natural, it's just the way that it is. Like, this is where the majority of the lands are, so this is where the concentration is. But we all have to realize, and I think, a lot of folks do, is that these are public lands. These are for everybody, no matter where you're living at. And so I think that folks that live in the Midwest and in the East, in areas where, as an Eastern hunter, I still rely a lot on public lands. But, it's the lands out west are for everybody, whether you're in East, West, anywhere. So I think that's the reason why it's concentrated in the West. But for the Artemis side of that question, what do you have to say?
Well, I think it's one, as Artemis, we are still growing.
And brand spanking new.
Brand spanking new. So we are still sort of getting our ducks in a row with how to tackle the East, I would say. What I do know is that because we are a national organization, we will be doing it. I just can't quite give you the how yet.
Yeah.
I do think expanding the talk on, and this was something, Artemis just did this great fence building down in Boise with the Idaho Wildlife Federation and the Idaho Fish and Game. And we were down there and we were talking sort of about the difference between how lucky we are to have the public lands here, but how important the private landowner is too. And I think that's a conversation that gets left out of this public lands fight. Public lands just sort of takes over, which is good, and it should. But when you get into the East and you have these private landowners that do open their property for hunters, and do manage well, and they whether it's wildlife management or maybe it's habitat management and are doing the right things, I think it's really important that we recognize that and we start talking about that a little more. Because the private landowner does a lot for the hunting community. I mean, you have programs like Access Yes, that's in, I know, Idaho, Wyoming, that does an amazing job for getting it so you can get whether into your public lands or, and I think it's important that we look at that. And I hope, and again, I can't tell you how, but I hope that we as Artemis recognize that it's the people taking care of our landscape, private, public, that are important.
Yes, and I would also like to add Pennsylvania and a lot of other eastern states have fantastic, Access Yes type programs. So if it's not something you looked into, just visit your state's Fish and Game website, and if they have a program like that, you'll be able to find it there, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's important to look into. I think always backing up the science, and that's something I would just say as a blanket for Artemis is whether it's you get into the minutia of these really emotionally charged conversations that are going around wildlife or going around public lands, that backing up the work that your local Fish and Game or Game and Fish do, and making sure that when you are expressing opinions about things is coming from a place of science first, and the respect for that, because these are people that build their lives around these animals or these lands that they're taking care of. And I think part of changing this discussion around hunting and the definition of hunting and the way that Artemis is sort of trying to make this an inclusive culture, it's going to mean broadening our emotional blinders to let in things that we're not always comfortable with talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a question that I liked. Nice. There is a question that I liked that asked, how do you find brands that are involved in conservation? And I think that is such a good question, because obviously as someone who cares about this kind of stuff, I want to put my money into brands that are supporting this as well. So my tip, and I don't know if you have any tips, but I'll ask you next. My tip would be visit their website. And if they have a section on their website that talks about conservation, they're probably a company that does stuff for conservation. If they don't, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't do anything, but that would kind of be a flag for me. Also, give them a call.
Absolutely.
See if the people that are talking on the phone know what the heck they're talking about. know what this kind of stuff is and what it means and how to be involved and know how their company supports that or doesn't.
And I think
that'd be a fun test, actually.
That's actually really a good point,
Yeah.
though, because if you're calling companies and maybe they don't support it, the more calls they get that's asking them to support conservation,
Yes.
the more that they will listen. I think
Yes.
really voting with your
dollar
is
Oh,
so
yeah.
important. And if
So true.
I mean, I've when I started working in conservation, and my eyes were open to exactly that thing about
Yeah.
the gear that was truly giving in, like, and giving back to what they what supported them, really.
Yeah.
I started sifting through my wardrobe and getting rid of things that weren't brands that supported conservation. I think
Yeah.
it's important that we talk about that, and it's I'd love to give them a call. Absolutely. Talk to them.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with your state legislature. Call them.
Call them.
Write
Tell them
'em.
you want it.
The more that we're
Gotta
a voice,
be vocal.
Yeah, you hunting has gotten so distorted because the good hunters haven't been talking about it. We have to be a voice.
That is
we have
pressure
to stand
for
up.
you guys.
So all you
And
that
us.
are on there, you better be, if you are representing hunting, and this goes as far as having, even tasteful grip and grins. You are an ambassador for good hunting.
True.
And people are looking at that. And think how many people on a Facebook feed see something that don't understand enough about hunting to really get it. You can't just say, all my friends are hunters. That's not the way that the world is and the way that the internet works.
Yeah, and actually, I want to jump in there. So this gal named Nicole, who works over at BHA, and I actually put on a seminar at this past year's BHA rendezvous.
Good.
And it was all about how to be a public lands advocate on social media. And one of those things, which I'm sure you get the point by now, we've said this 100 times, but it's telling the story. It's really like using social media platforms to tell the story. And sure, like we all love grip and grin shots. We all understand that as hunters, but yet, to really be representing, you got to think about the other folks out there who may not be exposed to those kind of things and how you're representing the industry, because every single one of you are, whether you believe it or not. If you are on social media, you are contributing to that.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of making sure that we as hunters can continue to hunt.
Yes.
Because if we get too distorted in that sense, we're going to be losing even the little, the support we have now.
Yeah.
So it is important to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone, it's don't think, you as your one person have a big reach. And don't think that what you do doesn't mean anything. I think that's really important.
There's a question right here. What's the single best thing? It went away. What's the single best thing that someone can do to support public lands? Is it like advocacy? Mm-hmm. Is it money? So contributing dollars. And there was a third one, but it went away, so I didn't catch it. But what would you say is the single most important thing?
Public lands?
Yeah.
Advocacy. Talk about it. Talk about your use. And I mean advocacy as in talk to your state legislature, talk to your federal representatives. Realize that the people that are managing our public lands now, I realize that public land management, nothing's perfect. Of course it's not. But asking for them to be fairly funded is a big thing. Mm-hmm. Very often they're working with this pittance of a funding. I think public land funding is less than 1% of the national budget. And we have these same people that are talking about how slow or, bureaucratic it gets. It's like, well, they are also working from, underneath what they should be.
Right.
And so one, yes, it's money, but more it's your advocacy telling them, these people, your legislators, they work for you.
Yes.
And telling them what you want is important.
Yes.
And so, talk about it in every way you can. Blow up their emails, write them letters. Always be kind and respectful, be firm, but be personal.
Yep. I think being personal and sharing your story is the best thing that you can do. I totally agree with that.
I see the last one is money, activism, or politics.
Politics. That's what you said.
And it's, it's all three.
It is all three.
It's all three. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah. It's so true.
I'm sorry, catching up.
I know, trying to catch through the questions here.
Oh, goodness.
Just in the screen now. I will say, so we've got about 10 minutes left before we are going to wrap this thing up. Again, we've got a Cypher Exo Mountain Gear hunting pack that will be given away to the person who asks the best question. So make sure you are asking questions, and that thing will be given away here. Well, we'll announce it tomorrow, but you've got 10 minutes left to get your questions in. And I would also like to add, we will be coming back tomorrow and answering some of these questions.
So if we didn't get to you.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm sorry if we didn't get to all the questions, but you guys have been asking great questions.
Oh,
have you seen one coming through yet?
I'm trying to catch up, you would think.
I know.
Talking about some of the First Lite gear, and I did see one that was one of my favorite pieces.
Ooh,
which was
I feel like hard.
Mine's a little biased because it's their Artemis women's hoodie. I feel like that works well, but it is something that I have the Fusion Camo one, and I love it to the point of where I know I have to get a solid one, so I stop wearing camo in public.
Yeah, because it's good.
Yep.
No, absolutely. I would say my favorite piece has now easily become the Alturas Guide Pants, and it's because I can wear those things for every single hunt all the time. Unless I'm sitting in a tree stand and it's bitter cold out, I would throw on the Sanctuary bibs. But really, those Alturas pants I
have a pair
beating the hell out of because they're awesome. 4-way stretch, so they're going to fit everybody really good. They're really great.
I did see one that was asking about Artemis and what conservation groups we work with or partner with hand in hand. Again, because we're so new, there's just a few. We are doing, like I said, with the Idaho Wildlife Federation, we've done a couple things there. And we have some events coming up with Montana Wildlife Federation and the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And we've been reaching within the Federation family now, but that doesn't mean we're not going to reach out. I mean, really, it's like whatever opportunity we can have to help uphold what we are standing for, whether that's public lands work or mule deer protection or cutthroat trout or even just women's recruitment. I mean, there's some great programs out there that I would love to partner with, but we've only been around for 3 months, so we're working on it. We're getting there.
Yeah. Question flew by that I really liked. How do I make wildlife conservation and public land protection my career?
Oof. Volunteer. That's the first way to get your foot in the door. Go to your conservation groups and say, what can I do? And be that super volunteer that puts on pint nights. I did that.
Yeah.
That puts on film tours, that does fundraisers, that does the footwork, because they need that. I mean, I know with Wyoming Wildlife Federation and with Artemis that without our volunteers, we wouldn't be around. You don't have a dog in a fight. So be the volunteer that shows up every time. Be the volunteer that talks about it. Be somebody that cares deeply. And when there are job openings, your name comes up first. I think that's really important.
I think that's a great recommendation. I'm going to kind of shy to the side of my experience, and that's finding companies that contribute to conservation and, get your butt in there as an internship or figure out a way to use your skills and apply them to something that company might need. Because I feel like I'm involved in conservation through my work every day, but, I work for a hunting apparel company.
I just saw a really great question that asks about what is something that hunters do that hurts the conservation cause. This is like, I think relying on our argument that hunters pay for conservation is a weak excuse. Yeah, maybe we do, but we have to do more than pay for it. We have to advocate for it and support it. And so I think just relying on that argument to non-hunters of why you hunt distorts the whole conservation message and distorts the whole hunting message. So I think shying away from that argument, come at it from a position of what do you actually do to support conservation? Do you show up to volunteer days? Do you build fences? Do you pull fences? Do you do collaring data? Do you do fundraisers? I think just keep that. And I saw another one. This is a great one. I want to say, don't shoot at road signs. Don't be the vandal.
Yes. And I'm going to jump in right here, and I'm going to tell a story. Jesse's probably going to want to, like, twist my ear off for even telling this story, but I think it's very applicable to this question. So while we were at our event this past weekend, there was a gentleman there that at the end of the project was fantastic. We were on the Boise River Wildlife Management area. It was awesome. But this gentleman at the end of the event was like, everybody who is a hunter, raise your hand. So, everybody that was raised their hand, he was like, oh, see, it's the hunters again, paying their dollars, here showing up. And yeah, of course, hunters do show up, but I felt like he was just drilling the line and just like causing conflict where there didn't need to be. We need to have an inclusive kind of approach to this thing. We want more people in this fight. And even though, sure, folks, doing outdoor rec activities on public land may not be fronting the dollars like hunters do whenever we buy our license and tags, and I get that, but your approach needs to be inclusive in this. We want to get these people on the same page as us, fighting for the same thing that we are.
I think that's incredible. It really is. That's exactly what we need to do. No, it's frustrating. And the thing that I would add to that is I was frustrated because I was like, well, we marketed this event to hunters, which is why we're here.
It's true. It's true.
But that is important. Always don't shut yourself out of a conversation because you're just a hunter. You are a conservationist too. Yes. And find your common ground.
Yes. And I think you need to approach conversations from that light as well. Mm-hmm. Again, we all care about the same stuff.
Yeah. I think a big thing, they're talking about what do we see Artemis doing and where do we want to go with that. I see Artemis as the bridge there. I would like Artemis to be the conservation and hunting group that can talk to both and be kind and respectful to that. I want to be inclusive. No, you don't have to be a hunter to be part of Artemis, but Artemis is hunters and anglers.
Yep.
And I want to extend that to the fact of, like, we are a women's group, but that doesn't mean that as a man you can't support it or you can't, help out or be involved.
As a guy, you probably have a girlfriend or a wife. You have a mother. You might have a daughter. There are women surrounding you that are important to you, I'm sure, and I hope that Artemis is sort of the venue for that to be shared.
I'm tired of being the only woman in the room. I want to be around 10 other women that are sitting in the season setting meetings asking for different things or have opinions on different comments that are coming up for land use plans. It's important, and policy can be dry, but it's important to protect what you've got out there.
Yep, I agree. All right, we are about to wrap this up here. Let me see. I do have an announcement for you all. So we are hosting another live event tomorrow, right back here on our Facebook page where you guys are at right now. That will be at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. The Stash will be back, which I'm sure you guys will be very excited about. And also another one of my coworkers named Ross Copperman will be here as well. And they are joining this fantastic guy named Bo Beatty. And it's going to be all about llamas. Using llamas as pack animals for hunting and for other activities. So it's going to be really cool. Make sure to tune in for that. So, Jesse, do you have any final thoughts, final goodbyes before we sign out here?
I think the big thing is wherever you're at, whatever state you're in, find the conservation group that works for you, but also find Artemis. We are national, so you can always plug in there and look for us in the future. We're coming up.
Mm-hmm. And my last piece of advice, so coming from First Lite, use us as a resource. If you have questions on these kinds of things, we are an office full of people who live this stuff day in and day out. And I really want to sort of extend that invite that we're here to, help guide you when you have questions.
And I would say remember to vote with your dollar, whether it's for the right gear that supports conservation or it's paying a $35 a year membership for conservation. I'm part of like 6 different conservation groups I'm a member of. Yeah. And it's important to do that because everybody's out there doing really good work, but they can only do it if they're funded. Yeah. And so become a member of these different conservation organizations. Yeah. Become a supporter of Artemis. Become a member in that. Vote with your dollar, not just in gear, but in the conservation groups that you're supporting. Again, you can't just rely on our tag fees to pay for things.
Agreed. All right, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in with us, and be sure to come back again tomorrow. Again, that's 1 p.m. Mountain Time. Another live event will be going on right here. That EXO Mountain Pack the winner will be announced tomorrow, and it'll be on this thread. We'll reach out to you directly, but make sure to check back just in case. And that is it.
Yeah.
All right,
absolutely.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Signing out.